Sennin. Note: according to the ancient Chinese legend, a holy hermit who usually lives in the heart of a mountain and has trained himself to various mystical powers, those of flying in the air at will and enjoying extreme longevity among them. End note. My dear young readers, I am stopping in Osaka now, so I will tell you a story connected with this town. Once upon a time there came to the town of Osaka a certain man who wanted to be a domestic servant. I do not know his real name. They only remember him by the common servant's name of Gonsuke, for he was, after all, a servant of all work. Now this man, we'll call him Gonsuke too, entered a "we-can-get-you-any-job" office, and said to the clerk in charge, who was puffing at his long bamboo pipe, "Please, Mr. Clerk, I wish to become a Sennin. Would you kindly find me a family where I could learn the secret while working as a servant?" The clerk remained speechless for a while, as if astonished at his client's tall order. "Didn't you hear me, Mr. Clerk?" said Gonsuke. "I wish to become a Sennin. Will you find me a family where I could learn the secret while working as a servant?" "We're very sorry to disappoint you," the clerk drawled, beginning to puff again at his forgotten pipe. "But not once in our long business career have we undertaken to find a situation for aspirants to your senninship. Suppose you go round to another place, then perhaps—" Here Gonsuke edged closer to him on his petulant blue pantalooned knees and began to argue in this way. Now, mister, that isn't quite honest, is it? What does your signboard say anyhow? It says, 'We can get you any job,' in so many words. Since you promise us any job, you ought to find us no matter what kind of jobs we may ask for. But now you may have lied about it all along, intentionally." His argument being quite reasonable, the clerk could not very well blame him for his angry outburst. "I can assure you, Mr. Stranger, there's no trick there. It's all straight," the clerk pleaded hastily. "But if you insist on your strange request, I must beg you to come round to us again tomorrow. We'll make inquiries today at all likely places we can think of." The clerk could see no other way out of it than to give him the promise and get him away, for the present anyhow. Needless to say, however, he had not the faintest idea, how could he indeed, of any household where they could teach their servant the secrets of senninship. So, on getting rid of the visitor, the clerk hastened to a physician living near his place. To him he told the story of his strange client, and then asked in an anxious, pleading tone, "Now, please, doctor, what sort of family do you think could train a fellow into a sennin, and that very quickly?" The question apparently puzzled the doctor. He remained a while in pensive silence, arms folded across his chest, vaguely looking at a big pine tree in the garden. It was the doctor's helpmate, a very shrewd woman, better known as Old Vixen, who answered for him, uninvited, on hearing the clerk's story. "Why, nothing can be simpler. Send him on to us. We'll make him a sennin in a couple of years." "Will you really, ma'am? That's great. Really, I can't thank you enough for your kind offer. But frankly, I felt certain from the first that a doctor and a sennin were somehow closely related to each other." The clerk, who was blissfully ignorant of her design, bowed his thanks again and again, and left in great glee. Our doctor followed him out with his eyes, looking as sour as anything, and then, turning round on his wife, brayed peevishly, "You silly old woman, do you realize what a foolish thing you've gone and said now? What the dickens would you do if the bumpkin should begin to complain some day that we hadn't taught him a scrap of your holy trick after so many years? But his wife, far from asking his pardon, turned up her nose at him and quacked, "Huh! You dullard, you'd better mind your own business. A fellow who is as stupidly simple as you could hardly scrape enough in this eat-or-be-eaten world to keep body and soul together." This counterattack succeeded, and she pecked her husband into silence. The next morning, as had been agreed upon, the clerk brought his boorish client to the doctor's. Country-bred as he was, Gunsuke came this particular day, ceremoniously dressed in haori and hakama, perhaps in honor of this important occasion of his first day. Outwardly, however, he was in no way different from the ordinary peasant. His very commonness must have been a bit of a surprise to the doctor, who had been expecting to see something unusual in a would-be Sennin. He eyed him curiously as one might a rare exotic animal, such as a musk deer brought over from far-off India, and then said, "I am told that you wish to be a Sennin, and I'm very curious to know whatever has put such a notion into your head." "Well, sir, I haven't much to tell there," replied Gunsuke. "Indeed, it was quite simple. When I first came up to this town and looked at the great big castle, I just thought like this, that even our great ruler Tycho, who lives up there, must die some day. That you may live in the grandest way imaginable, but still you must come to dust like the rest of us. Well, in short, that all our life is a fleeting dream is just what I felt then." Then old Vixen promptly put in her word, "You'd do anything if you could only be a Sennin." "Yes, madam, if only I could be one." "Very good. Then you'll live here and work for us for 20 years from today, and you shall be the happy possessor of the secrets at the end of your term." "Really, madam? I'm indeed very much obliged to you. But," she added, "for 20 years to come you won't get a penny from us as wages. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Thanks, ma'am. I agree to all that." In this way started Gunsuke's 20-year service at the doctor's. He would draw water from the well, chop firewood, prepare every meal, and do all the scrubbing and sweeping for the family. But this was not all, for he would follow the doctor on his rounds, carrying a big medicine chest on his back. Yet for all this labor Gunsuke never asked for a single penny. Indeed, nowhere in Japan could you have found a better servant for less wages. At last, the 20 long years passed, and Gunsuke, again ceremoniously dressed in his family-crested haori, as when he first came to them, presented himself before his master and mistress. To them he expressed his cordial thanks for all their kindness to him during the past 20 years. "And now, sir," he went on, "would you kindly teach me today, as you promised 20 years ago today, how to become a Sennin and attain eternal youth and immortality?" "Here's a go," sighed the doctor to himself at this request. After having worked him 20 long years for nothing, how in the name of humanity could he tell his servant now that really he knew nothing of the way to Senninship? The doctor wriggled himself out of the dilemma, saying that it was not he but his wife who knew the secrets. "So you must ask her to tell you," he concluded, and turned woodenly away. His wife, however, was sweetly unperturbed. "Very well, then, I'll teach you," she said. "But mind, you must do what I tell you, however difficult it may seem. Otherwise you could never be a Sennin, and besides, you'll then have to work for us another 20 years without pay, or believe me, God Almighty will strike you dead on the spot." "Very good, madam. I'll do anything, however difficult it may be," replied Gunsuke. He was now hugely delighted, and waited for her to give the word. "Well then," she said, "climb that pine tree in the garden." Utter stranger as she undoubtedly was to Senninship, her intentions may have been simply to impose any impossible task on him, and in case of his failure, to secure his free services for another 20 years. At her order, however, Gunsuke started climbing the tree without a moment's hesitation. "Go up higher," she called after him. "No, still higher, right up to the top." Standing near the edge of the veranda, she craned her neck to get a better view of her servant on the tree, and now saw his houri fluttering high up among the topmost boughs of that very tall pine tree. "Now let go your right hand." Gunsuke gripped the bough with his left hand the tighter, and then let go his right in a gingerly sort of way. "Next let go your left hand as well." "Come, come, my good woman," said her husband at last, now peering his anxious face upward from behind her. "You know, with his left hand off the bough, the bumpkin must fall to the ground. And right below there's the big stone, and he's a dead man as sure as I'm a doctor." "Right now I want none of your precious advice. Leave everything to me." "Hey, man! Off with your left hand, do you hear?" No sooner had she given the word than Gunsuke pushed away his hesitant left hand. Now, with both hands off the bough, how could he stay on the tree? The next moment, as the doctor and his wife caught their breath, Gunsuke, yes, and his houri too, were seen to come off the bough. And then, why, what's this? He stopped. In mid-air, instead of dropping like a brick, and stayed on up in the bright noonday sky, posing like a marionette. "I thank you both from the very bottom of my heart. You've made me a Sennin," said Gunsuke from far above. He was seen to make a very polite bow to them, and then he started climbing higher and higher, softly stepping on the blue sky, until he became a mere dot and disappeared in the fleecy clouds. What became of the doctor and his wife, no one knows. But the big pine tree in their garden is known to have lived on for a long time, for it is told that a couple of centuries later, a Yadoya Tatsugoro, who wanted to see the tree clad in snow, went to the trouble and expense of having the big tree, which was then more than 20 feet round, transplanted in his own garden.